Okay, I'd like to talk about the second of the principles of design that you'll need to know, and that is emphasis and focal point. Emphasis means that there are certain areas in a work of art that have more dominance, while focal point means there's like really one strong place in the work of art that where an artist would want you to go. Let's look at some of the different ways that artists get us to look at the focal points. And actually, I'm going to be honest with you, this is harder than you might think it is. Okay, so the first one is focal point by isolation. Be sure and write these down because you know me, I always do some different, have some different things than the book does. And if you look at this particular work, this is a William Harnett painting. He really only gives you one thing to look at, really, honestly, right? It's the gun. That he has all this space around it, and so it's the gun that you're drawn to. It's the biggest object there, but there just really isn't anything else. If you look down here, there's a little newspaper clipping, and on there it tells about the gun bite which it was used in, at some bar or something. But that's more like an emphasis area. The real focal point is here with the gun. So just give it space, put room around an object, and that will help it to be the focal point. If you look at this painting by John Singer Sargent, I bet you will say that these two people are the focal point. And that is largely because there's all this space around them. If they were in the middle of 15 people, they would not necessarily be the focal point. You probably wouldn't even notice them. But because they're up here by themselves, and there's so much space around them, you go, oh yeah, that's the focal point. Andrew Wyeth was like, this is his thing. This is his bread and butter. It's how he always makes a focal point. He just doesn't give you anything else to look at. And when you have a lot of space in a work of art, it really does tend to have a very lonely feeling about it. This is another work. This is his son, Jamie. And once again, just very little, there just isn't much in the work for you to see. The second way would be focal point by contrast. And in contrast, we're thinking differences between things. So in this particular work by the artist Rembrandt, the Dutch painter and printmaker from the Baroque period, you look at, this is the Descent from the Cross. And if we look at Christ, they're taking his body down off of the cross, and they're going to lay it on this blanket. And Rembrandt just lights this up, creating a contrast between the light and dark. And we tend to gravitate to when things are lighter so we can see it better. So this becomes the focal point merely by the fact that he lights it up. And never mind, you can't even tell where the light source comes from. I have no idea, right? It just kind of miraculously glows. Now, he also has a couple emphasis areas. Down here, he emphasizes the fact that once they get the body down, they're going to gently lay it on this blanket and wrap him in this blanket to take him to the tomb. And then over here, he also wanted you to know that Mary is really struggling with this, Jesus' mother, and she's fainting over here. Not to worry, she's being helped. There are people around her that are assisting her. But he's pointing out what's happening in this work very subtly on the sides, but obviously Christ's body is the focal point. This is The Night Watch by Rembrandt. See, here he does it again, right? Right up here in the front, these light up. He lights up these two figures, and right in here, his face is lit up, and you can see it very well. And over here, not only is his face lit up, but the clothing he wears pulls him forward. And then he creates this little emphasis area of this girl back here. She happens to be carrying she has a chicken that's hooked to her belt. It's a little odd. Nobody knows why. This is the Night Watch, and it's this militia company that's getting together, and they've been called out, and they're all, there's a lot of commotion going on, and everybody's getting their guns ready and their stuff ready, and they're going to go out to march. But you can see he's using that contrast again. Vincent van Gogh used contrast in this particular painting, the Café Terrace at night. And this is just showing you that how those warm orange, yellows, and reds will come forward, and cool colors like blues and purples will fall back. We talked about that when we talked about color. Warm colors advance, cool colors recede. And so you can use that to help you to create a focal point. This is the next one is focal point bidirectional line. You know the types of line, right? We talked about actual, psychic, implied. How do you use those to get people where you want them to go? Well, this is called The Supper at Emmaus by the artist Caravaggio, painted in the Baroque period. This would be, he would be at the contemporary of Rembrandt. And as you look at this, well, okay, this story, just really quick, I'll just really fast tell you this story, is that Jesus was crucified and resurrected. And after his resurrection, he came back and revealed himself to, different people, like some of the apostles and so forth. And there's a story that there are two of the apostles that are walking to Emmaus, and along the road, they meet up with a stranger and they walk with him and they talk with him. And then when they get to Emmaus, they invite him to have dinner with him. And when they all sit down, the stranger reaches up his hand to bless the food. And that's when they realize it's Jesus. I can't explain it. There is just, in some way, that Jesus just doesn't allow you to know it's him until he wants you to know. So with that said, you can see that the two seated apostles are just flipping out. Like that, they're just like, oh my gosh, like his arms are straight out. He's just, oh, I can't believe it's you. And he just kind of jumps back from the table. And this apostle over here, like he's even backing up his chair. He's like, whoa, I can't believe it, right? And then this guy over here, he just is wanting to know if they need more water or something because he's waiting on them. And he's wearing the hat that tells us that he's a servant back here. So he doesn't look nearly as worried about it. In order to get us to feel that same kind of adrenaline jolt that the apostles feel when they realize it's Jesus, Caravaggio always liked to do something a little catchy to get us into the picture and bring the viewer into it. And he does it in this painting with this basket of fruit. Let me show you a close-up of that. Do you see how that basket of fruit is just sort of teetering on the table? When I saw this painting, I actually fell for it too. The first time I saw it, I walked in and my heart just kind of jumped. I just felt that little bit jump of adrenaline because I wanted to reach out and grab that basket of fruit because it was so realistic. And so he gets us to feel the exact same way. Now, how does he get us all to go to Christ? Well, we've got lines, right? The arm lines here. You've got the vision lines here of all three of them. You have the edges of the table that all happen to go there. So he uses actual, implied, and psychic lines to get us to look at Jesus. We could also do focal point by size, and this one's super easy. Just make it bigger. Okay, so in this particular painting, the girls take up almost the entire canvas. Excuse me for just a second. And they become the focal point because they're just huge. Even though they're in front of an ocean, which we know oceans are very big, right? It is secondary or it is background to them. Now, focal point by subject matter. There are certain subject matters that just command our attention. There just isn't anything you can do about it, right? If somebody doesn't have their clothes on, they're going to get our attention, right? If there's something violent happening, it gets your attention. I think funny does too. I think if there's something funny in a work of art, that commands our attention. And so as an artist, you just have to be prepared that those sorts of things are going to be very consuming. I'm going to warn you, the next picture you're going to see is rather upsetting. This is Saturn devouring his son by Goya. This was painted in 1819. And interestingly enough, he painted this on a wall in his house. Goya had suffered with mental illness, and he painted this on a wall in his house, and eventually, after his death, it was taken off of the wall and transferred onto a canvas, and it's now in a museum. But the mythological story goes that Saturn was paranoid that his children would, overwhelm him and take over. And so as each of the children were born, he devoured them, right? He ate them. And it is super disturbing. And like I said, it's going to be an attention grabbing thing. Like you could, it almost wouldn't matter what other pictures were beside it, anything else happening around it, you're going to look, right? You just can't not see this. Nudity, right? Even though there are other figures in this work around her, she certainly commands all the attention because she's fully nude. Also, we could talk about placement. Where you put something in a work of art will also dictate whether it grabs our attention or not. One way to do it is on the ground line. The closer something gets to the bottom, the closer it feels to us. We talked about this with rising perspective. And so it feels like things are being pushed forward, and that kind of forces you to look at it. So that would be one way that you could place something in a work. Another way to do that would be what we call optimal center. So optimal meaning the vision center of a work of art. So as she is in the middle of this painting, but just up slightly, right? She doesn't go in a straight line with everybody else. She just kind of bumps up just a little bit higher than everybody else, but she's in the center. We gravitate toward the center and slightly up. So that'd be one thing that makes her the focal point, Venus, right here in the center of this work. Okay, now let's just talk about this for a look. Just look at a couple examples of this, because this is kind of what you're going to have to do when I'm going to put up a painting, and then you're going to have to say which one of these devices is the strongest, right? That you could create a focal point. So in this one, you might say contrast, right? Her robe is really, really dark, and the background is really, really light in this. Another one that you might say is I think it's placement. She's right in the middle. That might be another one. Size. She's bigger than the others. There is a little bit of isolation around her as well. So there are several that were used in this one, and I wanted to bring that up because an artist might, well, actually, if you want to know the truth, a good artist will use several because he's going to want to make sure that you get to the point he wants you to look at. This is the 3rd of May by Goya. And if you look at this, once again, I think you would all agree this is the focal point. Why? Well, probably contrast would be the biggest one. He's so light. And also probably directional line, right? Gun barrels would be a very strong directional line. This is the ascension of the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary has died, and tradition has it that her entire body ascended to heaven. There are no remains of the Virgin Mary on earth. And so if I asked you, what do you think is the way that Titian, that's the artist that did this, makes her the focal point? Because you probably all agree she's the focal point. So as you look at it, you go, well, she's in that optimal center. She's in the center and up slightly, so placement. There's some good space around her, so that could be isolation. Okay, that strong gold next to the red, that could be contrast. And where is everybody looking? Well, they're all looking at her, right? And if I show you, one time I sat down and just figured out how many directional lines were in here, and there's a bunch. Okay, so he's used several of them. Now, in your quiz that you're going to go do now for me, I have picked works of art that are strongly one of them. Okay, and so I want you to pick the best one for it. All right, I will talk to you soon.